maybe difficult to be asking either side to show accountability when neither side is, if that makes sense.
What, besides all the money, what on earth does Harry have to gain from telling all these stories?
It's a good question, Christine. I look. So I should probably just flat out say, from a personal perspective, I'm not convinced these memoirs ever work for the author in the long term. I have a feeling nearly everyone else involved gets a better deal out of the book, apart from the money, than the author does. I think for him, I hope for him, it was as cathartic as it seemed. I think this is someone who was in a not totally unique position. Obviously, he has his family who were in similar positions, but in comparison to most people, it is a unique position that he finds himself in. What he could say, what he couldn't say, what he should say, what he shouldn't say, as he was growing up. This book seemed to be an awful lot of things that most people, I don't think, would have gone into the detail that he does in this book. So I think it's perhaps a letting off of a safety valve of what he can say. So hopefully that gives a sense of catharsis. But we all know from certain very famous interviews or famous books that it gets quoted back at the author decades after they've moved on. So there may be a little bit of, when Harry has moved on from this stage in his life and is in a great place, maybe one day with his birth family and his brother, that book's still going to be there. So I think perhaps, like a lot of people who write these books, he could one day sort of hope it's put to bed. But cathartic would be the best answer I could give to that, apart from, as you mentioned, the advance.
Definitely. I mean, where do they go from here? I mean, he really wants the royal family to take accountability and to, speak their truth. Sure. And own up to what they did. But that's not really in the royal playbook. So, I mean, where do they kind of go from here?
No, I think if you want people to take accountability, you also have to take a little bit yourself. And I think one of the harshest criticisms and one of the most consistent criticisms of the book is that there's almost no point where he says, I could have done something differently. Fundamentally, my family handled this terribly. The press treated us atrociously. They are responsible for the death of my mother. But in this one incident, I could have handled it differently. That sort of isn't in the book. And so I think it's maybe difficult to be asking either side to show accountability when neither side is, if that makes sense. I think one of the more encouraging things, however, is that he did say that he wants a relationship with his family. Whilst the royals are not, I don't think we are going to have them sit down and tell their story. I'd be really, really surprised if they did that. But we do know that King Charles III has kept the invitation to the coronation open and has made it really clear that not just the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, but also Lilibet and Archie are very welcome in London in May for his coronation. So I think the doors are open. Both sides are saying the doors are open. I don't think the channels of communication are going to be open, though, for quite some time. That's just my instinct.
Definitely.
Yeah, one of the quotes that really that sort of shook a lot of people was that Harry said Charles asked him and his brother not to make his last years more difficult. Is this not exactly what Harry is doing? And, what meaning can we really take from this?
Sure. Look, one thing I will say is that, obviously in their day, both Charles and Diana did do these big sit-down interviews. And so, it's difficult to ask Harry not to do what was done in the previous generation. He has gone a step further, quite a few steps further, in terms of what he's prepared to reveal compared to what Charles and certainly Diana did. I'll be very honest, that was the bit of the whole book for me that I felt uncomfortable reading, because to me there is something very sacred and important about grief. And this was happening right after the then Prince Charles had buried his father. And I did not necessarily feel like it was my place or anybody else's place to be reading what Charles said in the minutes after his father was buried. that just, I mean, I've recently gone through bereavement myself, and I thought if anyone was quoting, even, Charles comes out quite sympathetically from the quote, but if anyone had come out and was quoting things that I said after my loved one's funeral, I would feel very betrayed, because grief is a very intense, multi-headed thing. And I did not think that even the concept of privacy was respected in terms of that being revealed. So I understand people, myself included, who think that was a revelation that maybe wasn't the Duke of Sussex's to make.
For more news content and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below and visit usmagazine.com.